Peter Diamandis calls Mike Koenigs an arsonist of the mind. He helps entrepreneurs create their next act. High net, low overhead, high impact, fewest moving parts, lifestyle compatible business they love. He's a serial entrepreneur with 5 exits. He's a 17 times best-selling author and the secret weapon of founders looking to create and launch a new business after an exit and to build a personal brand and grow an audience and increase their lifetime value. Mike, welcome to the next level.
Nice to be here. Great to spend some time with you today.
Really been looking forward to this,
Appreciate
Mike.
it.
Yeah. One of the things I just really have always appreciated getting to know you in Free Zone and Strategic Coach is just the way that you show up in the room. So I'm just really grateful for our audience to have the opportunity to hear you today.
Oh, thanks. No, it's a total pleasure for sure. As you guys know, Strategic Coach it's like my family. It's my home. Dan Sullivan, I always say, is kind of like a best friend, brother, father, grandfather, mentor all rolled in one. And, we all get to learn to speak a language, the entrepreneurial language. So thank you very much.
Well, and that's a perfect place to start because I want to talk about masterminds, right? Because I mean, anybody who spends any time on Facebook or Instagram or X, they see these mastermind groups that are forming. And oftentimes my observation is that these masterminds are comprised of people who can't do, so they choose to teach, right? But your masterminds, the sort of groups that you've been a part of for a long period of time, like Strategic Coach, like being affiliated with Tony Robbins and learning from him. And, the groups that you're in are clearly next level masterminds. So what is it that separates or defines a really outstanding mastermind from all of this other, all these other options that are out there, but aren't actually serious? They're money makers for the person who's hosting the program.
Yeah, that's good. Really good question. So I'll lump them into a couple different groups because at any given time, I'm probably in 5, 6, 7 different masterminds. To me, I would say there's the family you're born into, the family you choose. And for many, many entrepreneurs, we're lonely because no one thinks like us or speaks our common language or understands that what entrepreneurialism, it's all about value creation. And I think there's a certain type of person who's born this way, and so what I've found are the best entrepreneurial groups have a mixture of members. I've been in a lot of them where historically they were all male dominated because there weren't that many successful females who had businesses large enough to join a lot of masterminds. And there's the beginner mastermind, there's the intermediate, then there's the advanced ones. And the best advanced ones are constantly mentoring younger members, men and women. There's a mixture, and the mindset of all the attendees is not what can I get, but what can I give. They're not there because they feel the need to become parasites, vampires, and predators, but instead they're looking for expansive relationships and collaborations. And when you show up as your best self and you contribute and you're enthusiastic and you are contribution first, business always follows. But bad news travels fast, and predators and predatory behaviors are reported quickly to the founders. And if it's a high quality group, those people are out of there real fast. So, and again, I'd say, like, for example, I just spoke at a Tony Robbins Lions, which is his highest end group. I mean, you're committing to almost $200,000 a year to belong, plus you're going on trips. I mean, it's a $300,000 investment, and then if you have a spouse there, it's going to be another $100,000, right? So you're in a committed, dedicated group where people have skin in the game, which is another important thing. If you're in Peter Diamandis' Abundance 360, you're very much an abundance-minded, future-paced environment. In Strategic Coach, Dan Sullivan would say, you gotta be potty trained first. So you're gonna go through what he calls the signature program for a couple of years, and you have to learn the language of coach, because just like a great marriage, you gotta work on it. And people who have been married a long time, I've been married 22 years. I think we're just really getting into our stride right now, where we can communicate a year's worth of wisdom, knowledge, and information inside of 30 seconds. And that's what a great partnership, that's what a great collaboration is. And I really think that 1 + 1 = 11. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but there's huge complexity there. And ultimately, I easily invest $300,000 a year or more belonging to these groups. And to say, I mean, it easily produces a 10x in terms of just revenue to me. But it's not about the money. It's about the people you're around and the value we're creating together. The money is a byproduct of who's in the room.
I think that's so fascinating that, this is not just pure observation, and it's even more than lived experience, right? This is a ongoing annual commitment in excess of $300,000. You putting your money where your mouth is. And one of the things that I know that you're passionate about is the ability to be coachable, the coachability, right? And I think that maybe is the other half of, the mastermind question is, you first have to get into or be a part of a great mastermind that has the qualities you just discussed. But then once you get there, it's that mindset of giving rather than receiving. It's the openness to being coachable. What are the best ways to be coachable? Like, you're spending at an elite level, you're in the biggest and best rooms. How do you get the most out of it personally?
Rapid implementation. So here's what I do. If I'm at Strategic Coach, so one of the things that I always do is I'm a voracious note taker, and I'm in two modalities simultaneously. One of them is I'm actively taking notes, and then I'm actively implementing. So the last time I was at Coach, I was listening, I was taking notes, and simultaneously I had a specific implementation that I needed. Like 2 days from them, I was going to be doing a documentary on AI. And so I was creating a whole bunch of slides for the presentation I was going to make that were relevant to what I was learning. And then I was writing outbound messages, and I came up with a new product idea. So while I was there, I wrote a spec for the product, and I delivered it to a team member who started implementing it while I was there. And then I wrote probably a third of a framework for a new book I'm working on right now. So by the time I finished day one, I had gotten more done while I was sitting there than I'd probably get done on my own in 3 days. And that combined with, I contributed to the room, and I had 2 people walk up to me and say, "Hey, I want to work with you." So, if you just think about that, that's several $100,000 in revenue, probably will translate into millions over the course of the lifetime value. And all I did was listened, implemented, and shared. And so to me, I feel that in a bad environment, you get spoken at, you take a bunch of notes, and then you have a big long to-do list, and the next time you show up at the next meeting, you're frustrated because you have a big long to-do list and nothing got executed on. The way I work and the way I do what I do when I'm creating next act businesses with people is there a real-time done-with-you workshop, which all quick start founders wish they had, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting a whole bunch of knowledge, a big long to-do list, and going and speaking to a team who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't have the same value system as you, who doesn't value speed of implementation and time the same way you do. And an employee mindset is, how do I do what I need to do so that I get paid and don't get fired? Okay. Versus a founder's like, how do I create leverageable, repeatable income, revenue, and equity that could be sold someday with a freedom-based mindset? And that's not a dig against an employee mindset. It's just very different. You can't expect employees to think like you do, behave like you do, and understand time value and leverage like you do.
So, Mike, one of the things I'm curious, because I've sat in those workshops too. So you're saying you got all those things, you get all those things done in the workshop?
Yeah.
All of them?
Yeah. I'll walk out of there. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's just really amazing to me because, like, I mean, I've sat in those workshops, and like for me, I've had to build in the best practice for me is I have a late checkout the following day, because for me, the ability to put that best thinking into motion requires time, but to see the way that you're showing up in the workshop and to be able to create all that content as you're going. You know, we've got a high-powered audience here, but that's a pretty high-level gift there.
Well, it took a few years to figure it out and learn. You know, I think if you imagine for a moment that I think what I believe to be true is we're born with certain innate abilities, like maybe our biological life form is a vehicle, and it's got certain capabilities. Like if you're a natural born athlete, someone who might have a tendency towards coordination and fine motor skills, and someone else who might be optimized for certain kinds of brain work. And then there's another part, which is the trained operator, which you learn in school and by discipline and repetitive work, and learning how to make both of those work, which means the operator has to learn what the innate capabilities of the vehicle is that it's driving, and needs to learn the feedback mechanisms and the upper limits challenges it has. And then there's a psychological mix, which is, you know, are you anxiety prone, or are you, you know, whatever those, so that, you know, a Colby score might dictate that, or your Enneagram, or whatever kind of personality profile. So, you know, I think becoming a master of the vehicle and a master operator, and understand how the feedback mechanisms work, and also learning how to take those limitations and make them strengths. So my natural state is anxiety driven, and I've learned how to turn that into a superpower and read it and take advantage of it. So, and I also know, for example, like I am a morning optimized activity person and creative person, and an afternoon optimized executor. And I came from a line, like my dad was the most remarkably disciplined worker I've ever known, a machine. And I think I inherited or observed those skills and the benefits, but what he never learned, he was a barber. So he made money while he was cutting hair, and there was no leverage to speak of. And on one hand, I always admired and respected him, and at the same time, I sure as hell didn't want his life. And you know, I figured out how to adapt and convert my capabilities into something that builds value and equity at a rapid pace. So my feedback response loop to that was, I don't ever want a life like my dad lived.
Yeah. Well, I saw the quote of yours, two most powerful words in business, now and done, based on based on the way that you're living, you're living into that for sure.
I have to, because I have the most severe ADHD. I'm on the Colby score, I'm a 3195, which for those who don't know, 3 fact finder, which basically means I'm an intuitive. I don't need a lot of data to make a decision. 1 one follow through, which means my modality must be I'll either do it right now, or I'll schedule to do it with you, or I will delegate it, or I have to say no because I will disappoint you and me and ruin my reputation by making a promise to do homework, which I never have done in my entire life. I literally never did homework ever. So I'd either do it immediately, I would outsource it, meaning pay or bribe someone, or I would cheat or find a shortcut.
One follow-up question I have just on that in general is the like if you think about how all that works together, right? So you're in workshops with the highest level, you're intuitive, you're picking up stuff, and you're just in motion, literally in the workshop, right? Then you go to another mastermind, right, with the highest level people. How often do you like have friction in the convergence of the sound that you're getting from different workshop rooms? Like, do you ever have to walk things back that you activated on? From no.
Nah, I you know what I do now is I have a pretty speedy disposal tactic, and I've learned now to not pursue shiny objects unless I can follow my rules. So what I've learned, this took a long time, what I'm about to say. I live with hard borders and lots of polarizing filters. So I believe direct is kind, and to commit to something and not do it is very unkind, and to say you're interested in something when you aren't or don't also. So I'm going to reveal a terrible mistake I made a couple weeks ago, which I'm so embarrassed to say, but there was a great life lesson here that I will never ever repeat again. So here's what happened. We're right now building a group of AI developers because we're building apps and bots and tools, and they have to follow our process, which means we have to be able to prototype them and have something functionally useful, what we call an MVP1, which means it does something within 48 hours, which historically in the software world wasn't easy to do. And then we've got a way of ramping that up. And through a friend who I really admire and I've worked with for 15 years, he said, hey, I got a guy. I'm like, okay, great. And I met this guy, and he was an a-hole, and I hated him immediately. Just hated him. And he represented, like, I've employed a lot of coders in my life, and I thought, well, I'm not going to just not work with them right away because I wanted to at least respect my friendship with this guy. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe my first impression isn't right. And so I decided not to trust my gut. And this guy just irked me. And I will also say there's a whole bunch of things. And I'll also say I have struggled with certain kinds of developers from certain countries, okay? So if I say anything more, it'll be interpreted to be racist. It's just a cultural distinction, and there are certain countries where lying is normal, okay? Not telling you the truth and saying, yes, we can do that when they don't know how to do it, and exaggerate, okay? So anything more would get me in trouble. And I really don't care, but I'm just going to be kind. So anyway, and this guy would make something, and I've learned really quickly he had no aesthetic whatsoever. So his stuff looked like crap. His spelling was terrible. And I know that I'd have to have a filter between him and me before I'd ever put any of his stuff in front of a client, or I'd look like a jackass. So I approach every project and everything I make through the lens of I am willing to risk my reputation on what I'm going to make next. All right? So now this guy automatically, it means I can't trust him. I can't trust his work, and I'm going to have a filter which complicates my life and makes everything he'd ever touch more expensive. And then he made something, and I gave him an explicit specification on how I wanted something made because I did a lot of research, and I have a background in writing code. And he came back and he blamed the platform when something didn't work, and which is always a sign. So I had every warning sign a lot of times to get rid of this guy and quit wasting my time. And then finally turned it around, and I basically told my team ahead of time, there's no way in hell I'd ever work with this guy. But in the end, he kind of pulled a rabbit out of his hat, and he took some of my feedback and he implemented it. And there were some good things, but he didn't use the platform I wanted. He didn't do things the way I wanted. And like I said, stuff looked like crap. And it was like, well, and he blamed a platform that had been around for 7 years instead of figuring it out. So I know he didn't innovate. I know what he wanted to do, which is he's a rigid-minded guy who blames other people and other people's platforms, and is unwilling to learn new skills. And they say that old saying about you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, it's an old dog that doesn't want to learn. So, and you also can't teach cavemen how to become something unless they've got an innovative mindset. I think, Dan Sullivan and I both agree on this. People have been smart for a long time, for 10,000 years. And you could take someone 10,000 years ago and put them in today, and they'd adapt and conform. And then another type of person who's rigid, and usually they're super high fact finders, will just invoke their own PTSD and crumble. And the human condition doesn't like to adapt and retrain itself very frequently. So at the end of the day, I made another stupid mistake, which is I said, this guy showed up 6 minutes late for a meeting. And I have a rule, which is if you steal my time, it's the same as stealing from me. It's an unforgivable sin. I just don't do it. If you don't tell me that you're going to be late, I find that very infuriating. And again, I will just flat out say, well, I can't work with you. But again, I decided, well, he did an okay job and I really need someone. And then at the end, I was like, let me think. And I didn't want to fire him in front of my friend, okay? So I committed to following up before the end of the day, even though I knew I wasn't going to work with him. So by this time, I'm disgusted with myself. And then he ended up writing me the next day because I had to jump on a plane that day, and I had a lot of important stuff going on that was going behind the scenes, and I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And he said, you know what? You're an entitled something. And what I wanted to say is, look, there's, first of all, no good deed goes unpunished, was one of the grand lessons I learned a long time ago, which is I knew better, and I did it anyway, over and over again, because I respected my friend so much. And I went against all of my gut reactions. And then what I really wanted to say is, look, for every one of me, there's 100,000 of you. I don't think I'm better than you. It's just I'm really good at what I'm good at. And I could find a lot of you who are going to be 100 times better than you. And I've earned the right to be arrogant. And I've earned the right to be right. And I violated all my own rules. But instead, I just said, you're right. I texted him back because there was no reason to start, because this guy just wanted to pick a fight and make me wrong after I told him he sucked, basically, in the nicest way possible. So that took on too long, and it probably positioned me as the biggest jerk ever. But I'm so frustrated, and I really realized I must create these polarizing borders. And I vowed to myself, I will never not trust my immediate gut. I will never, ever bend my rule. And when you cross the line, it doesn't mean I won't be nice to you. It doesn't mean we can't be friends. I will never work with you ever again, because whatever you show up as and whatever's annoying will be 10 or 100 times worse as soon as we're married.
Yeah, absolutely. And you worked in there and you came back to it. I want to dig into it a little deeper, though. You said that you live with hard borders and lots of polarizing filters. Can you give what does that mean? Expand on that.
Yeah. So I have a client that I did something with, and we really created an amazing brand. And I was coaching. And oftentimes when we build a brand and we create a product that cost 10 times more to an audience that's 10 times better, and someone has been doing what they've been doing for 5, 10, 20 years, it is very uncomfortable for them to make a switch and have a higher value conversation with a higher value people and represent a higher value product. It's packaging, positioning, and messaging. And what they will do very often is second guess, and what they'll do is start fault finding the new business and try to downgrade it to what they're comfortable with. And then they'll get shiny object syndrome and then get distracted instead of focusing on the new thing and the important thing, the thing that will give them salvation and also upgrade their soul. And in this particular case, this individual came back and said, well, so-and-so's doing this. And this individual has an opportunity to work with someone who was really famous and super successful and still is, but doesn't have the following they used to. And I just, when each time this individual got back to me, I said, I'm just going to tell you now, you can do whatever you want and you can discard the huge investment you made in yourself and in me, but I'm going to tell you in advance, I told you so, and I think it's effing stupid. So it's stupid for a lot of reasons, and I gave the 3 reasons it was stupid. And this is 30 years of experience and wisdom and making a lot of expensive mistakes that have contributed to me being worth what I believe. I could be worth 100 times more than I am right now, and I got to find that worth. I'm fine, okay? I'm not mad or frustrated or angry. I just know better. I know the psychology, and I've seen it in mass. And now, in the past, I would be nice and I'd tap dance, but then they'd come back after they made stupid mistakes and say, "Why didn't you say so?" And I wish I would have had super direct mentors when I was making really stupid mistakes who could have communicated to me in a way I could hear. And so, my hard borders are now I let people know right away, I will not dance and be nice and waste yours or my time doing stupid things. And Elon Musk gets in his new book, if you read it or poured over it, he uses that word, and I don't mind using the R word. I don't care if anyone likes me anymore. I don't care. And I used to play I care about all that for a long time, and it hurt me and it hurt other people because it wasn't honest. And now my wife, who's a very sensitive, very emotional person, I can't remember what happened, but we ran into a couple situations where I had a person older and much more successful than me did something so abominably dumb that wasted 3 days of my time, and I called him on it, and it ended up ending the professional relationship. We're still friendly, but he wouldn't own it. And it was such an abominably stupid waste of time that he didn't apologize for. I'm like, I told him what I thought, and I just said, that'll be the last time that ever happens. And I called him on it, and he couldn't deal with it because he's used to being king. And so I got a rule, which is I'll walk into the room and piss on the king's feet. Don't care. Don't care if you like. Don't give 5 Fs. No, don't. I give 0 Fs. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I love the free nature of it, and the fact that you're at a point with enough experience and success to be able to say, you know what? No, that I'm calling a spade a spade. That is stupid. But I want to contrast that a little bit with, and maybe it's not a perfect contrast, but you also kind of said in passing, my natural state is anxiety, but I've turned it into a superpower. So on the one hand, I hear someone very free to speak their mind, very, calls it as they see it, right? But on the other hand, I'm hearing that inside there's a lot of anxiety, and you've managed to channel that in a way. I don't think you're alone in that feeling in the entrepreneurial journey. Can you tell me a little bit about how you channeled it into a superpower?
Yeah. So, I've got a 21-year-old right now, and he's definitely he is the product of the lockdown. And like, you know, most kids his age are medicated, depressed. They don't have a lot of hope for the future. And they don't understand how to create value. It's like a fatherless society suddenly, even if they had great fathers. And I'd consider my wife and I are very good parents. Like we've really worked hard to be good parents and a good couple and have a united front. And we've had means. Both of us grew up, I won't say I grew up poor, but lower middle class. My wife grew up in a slum in Spanish Harlem, the daughter of 2 Holocaust surviving Jews who like narrowly escaped with their lives, and they had a hard life with no real living relatives. Like they were boxcarred up and baked. All right. So I'm not saying that for any pity, because I love my background and thank God I was born to who I was born to. And I do believe that there is, in fact, there is hard scientific evidence that trauma is passed on in your DNA. Like there's definitely a signal for it. So I think what I've learned to do is in the past, the reason I brought up my son is he internalizes his anxiety, and it sends him into spirals and loops. So he'll sit and he'll just want to be in bed and lay around. And what I did is I didn't have a choice. Okay. It was like, I got out of the house. I started working the day I turned 16. I just got out there. So I became, I guess you could say, a work addict. And that was my coping mechanism. Because if I were poor, I would have nothing because my parents didn't have anything to give me. And I was out of the house as soon as I was 18 years old. And then I started working professionally. I had a couple of my own businesses. I worked 3 jobs a lot of the time. And so I found that my coping mechanism was just immerse myself. But there are byproducts of that, which is I think I spent a lot of time in a state of rage and anger, not feeling in control. So all these emotions and these feelings were also unmanaged and unprocessed. And, you know, if you fast forward decades later, I you know, after a business costing me a marriage, really, I cost me that marriage because I didn't understand communication and intimacy. I take 110% responsibility, whether it was she had any part of it or not. And I think along the way, when I started doing some work and getting help and going in Tony Robbins events and immersing myself in masterminds and seeing a shrink, and doing some therapy and doing some spiritual work, that I learned how to read the anxiety as a feedback mechanism. And now I think I've learned how to read someone's reaction and response to me. So even though I was being jerky and super direct and polarizing a moment ago, it doesn't mean I don't feel everything you're feeling. It does not mean I'm not emotional or empathic, because I'm hyper empathic. I feel other people's pain. I used to feel their pain and not know it wasn't mine. Okay. Which made me even more anxious, and more angry and more rageful. And now, I've learned how to temper it to communicate more effectively, or read it and read my own reactions and spot it ahead of time, and use it as a sixth sense in a sort of a way, or as a way to learn how to communicate more effectively, a lot more information with fewer words. It's made me a good writer, you know? And I also learned that anxiety, the fear of running out, not having enough, not being enough, now I can turn it into getting a lot done in a short period of time. And how to ball up and concentrate that energy. So I borrow from my anxiety and turn it into useful energy that can make things and create value.
How long did this transformation, this evolution in your thinking and feeling, how long did it take?
Until 5 seconds ago. I would say, so I'm 57 right now. My last really significant reinvention happened probably around 2017. So let's call it 6-7 years ago, when I couldn't articulate this at the time, and I wrote about it in my book, Your Next Act, but I had outgrown who I was, what I did, why I did it, who I did it for. A whole bunch of my businesses quit working, and I was seen as a guru, a big fish in a small pond in online marketing. And I was so ashamed to say, I don't know what to do. And I was depressed, and I didn't know I was depressed. I was so anxious. I could not sleep. I was suicidal. And I sure as hell wasn't going to talk about that. And a whole bunch of my marketing, which I'm supposed to be the guru of, quit working. Operationally, my businesses were a nightmare. And I hated most of my employees because they had quit evolving, and I hadn't managed them. It was self-hatred is really what it was. I was so mad at myself for not being a mentor to my own team that they had become obsolete. And now I've got abandonment issues, and it cost me a couple $1 million to wind down the business. I mean, it was just a crap show. And I found a way to get some help and some very, very intense coaching that involved a full reprogramming, like a full identity reset. And I did a whole bunch of wild cleanses, like these crazy Chinese cleanses. I've never talked about this public before, but I remember going through this cleanse that basically caused like your organs to flush. It's where you're spending a lot of time on the toilet over a period of 24 hours, and stuff comes out of you you've never seen before, okay? But I also experienced what felt like an entity leaving me, and I either hallucinated or saw something exit me that felt like a demon. And for the first time in my life, I felt peace. Like I could just breathe and not feel like I had steel cage around my chest. Like I could take a full deep breath. And that was like 7 years ago, okay? So before that, if I go backwards, my wife and I were having some problems. Before that, I had a plant medicine experience. I guess it was after that, where I did 5-MeO DMT. Like, so I would say there have been significant breakthroughs that my 20 years ago self wouldn't be ready for, but my evolutionary self would be. And a lot of it had to do with like just saying, I'm so freaking green and wrong. And I didn't know anything about anything. And just, and as a result, I became a good husband. I became a good father. And I could provide the safety and security that they needed that I was afraid to give or unable to give, and acknowledge that. So I think extreme ownership and responsibility. And then, this past week, some pretty extraordinary stuff happened. My wife and I are building a development in Mexico right now. So we're building a community in Baja, and we are way, way out of our comfort zone. Like, we have a lot of capital at risk. We're building in Mexico where you have a whole new set of rules you got to learn, and we don't know what we're doing, but we're spending a lot of time on the ground talking to a lot of Mexicans and a lot of Americans, a lot of expats, a lot of builders. And, and we're old enough right now where we got fewer in front of us than we do behind us. And 4 years of our life out of our remaining mobile years are really valuable and important to us. And it's like, is this where we want to invest and spend them? So,
Mike, I really just want to acknowledge and just appreciate what you shared with us. I mean, that's sounds like a significant reinvention that you talked about, and just a huge, huge. I mean, I don't even have the words, honestly. And I'd like to pride myself at how the words. I just don't. And so thank you. I am curious because I know you've been through several reinventions, and I know that you help people with reinventions. So I'm curious how you put that incredible set of experiences to work for other
Mm,
people, right?
sure. Well, here's let me pre-frame it a little bit and say that I like 3 years ago, I was at an event. Actually, it was a very similar event to the one I just left from. I was in Mexico at a Mastermind while we were down working on our property. And this guy came up to me and we were talking, and he asked me a question. I go, man, and I told him a little bit of what I just told you. I'd reached a point where I had outgrown who I was, what I did, why I did it, who I did it for. I was suicidal, and I had no one to talk to about it. And I'd never felt these feelings before. I cannot sleep. Like, I could not sleep. And I'm taking sleeping pills, which is the first time I've ever done that, and they quit working. So now I'm anxious and depressed and suicidal. I got no one to talk to. I'm terrified to bring it up and talk to my wife. I don't want to show weakness around my kid because I'm afraid that's going to traumatize him forever. I can't tell my team that I'm broken, and I'm afraid I'm going to be abandoned by all my customers who look up to me, right? So I just feel trapped. And I got a $2 million hard net problem I got to solve, which will decimate a lot of my liquid assets, okay? So I'm kind of feeling tripped up. So I had mentioned something about this, and this guy who runs a $40-some million company bursts into tears. And he said, that's exactly where I am. I want to kill myself right now. I got no one to talk to. And you're the first founder entrepreneur who's ever shared something like that with me. And he just pulled me aside and he just wanted me to hold him. And I mean, this is a powerful grown man, right? And he wants to be seen as powerful. And when I started sharing that story, I cannot tell you how many conversations I had of people who pulled me aside and said, that is exactly where I am. Or I'm feeling that's happening to me right now, and I'm terrified of what's going to come next. So they're either in the beginning of the storm, the middle of the storm, or the end of the storm. And it's men and women. It's not just men. And what I found is most founders and entrepreneurs, somewhere in their, as early as their late 30s, but usually around their 40s, all the way into their 60s or 70s, go through this cycle of outgrowing. And it is a spiritual calling that you feel so trapped. And I think it's a soul calling, which is you must reinvent. You have completed this. If you ignore it, it winds up destroying you. I've seen so many people become addicts and alcoholics. They abandon their long-term marriages for a younger woman, or vice versa. A woman, it's like they just want to get that thrill back, and it's unconscious. It's like the self-destructive pattern. And ultimately, when they're able to articulate it, which I can now, it's when you're looking for a simpler, high net, low overhead, fewest moving parts, no or few employees, no bureaucracy, lifestyle compatible business that allows for your self-expression. Okay, which in coach language is your unique ability. In the language of the big leap, it's your zone of genius. In mine, it's your superpower. So I believe that the evolution from human being is to human expression. And that's when you are a fully integrated human. And so now what I do is I find people who resonate with the idea of creating their next act. And I've built a team of what I wish I had 7 and 10 and 20 and 30 years ago, which is a team that can interpret what I mean when I talk about what I'd like my future vision to be fully seen, and to integrate that into that business. And we build them in a week. So it's like a Y Combinator for your next act, for your next human expression. And yeah, I think it's my calling.
I love that. And I love just that just connectedness. And I love that you're helping other people from your pain, right? As your pain is other people's gain.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
I don't feel the pain anymore, thank God. It's like, but I couldn't have gotten past it if I didn't respect this calling from, whether you call it God or Creator, right? And I believe in both. I know so. I've felt it at the deepest level. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's
No. I'm grateful because honestly, that's where I was gonna go. For me, I had heard an interview that I think was on your show, and we've already talked today about community. We've already talked about the family we're born into, the family we choose. But I heard you talk about your father, and it really struck me. My dad is about to move in with us. He just got a double lung transplant, and we had a lot of friction growing up, and our relationship is in a much better place. And it's on the. I really attribute it to spiritual, like faith, right? And I heard you talk
yeah,
about your father, and you mentioned that he wasn't religious, but he was a spiritual high performer. You said he went to church every single day, if I'm not mistaken. And
yeah,
so I would really love just like
yeah.
let's get the wisdom of your father for a moment, because I
Mm,
just think that would be a really great way to capstone the thing we're talking
sure.
about here.
Whew. Well, I'll try to hold it together while I do this. So we just buried him about 3 months ago.
So sorry.
And he was both a spiritual high performer and religious. So he's very Catholic. He grew up in a German Catholic family where he learned German before he learned English, and they were poor. And he basically ran away, joined the army to avoid indentured servitude from very abusive, and he was expected to take over the family farm, in classic Midwestern German family, and he just didn't want to be stuck doing that. He had a higher calling for himself. And so, I think, my dad's wisdom, in a way, your first impression could be he's a simple man. He did not grow up with much. He was articulate in his way, but never a big vocabulary. I mean, I had a high school education, went into the army, became a barber, and on some levels a simple man, but at the same time gifted musician, singer, dancer, could fix or do anything. I never saw him stumped, other than technology, I guess, but and he gave me access to his tools when I was a kid. Like when I was 5 years old, he gave me a power jigsaw, and I was always allowed to make things and do things. And and we had guns, I grew up with guns since I was 5 years old, and we fished, and I learned to fillet when I don't even know if I was 5 years old, so we ate out of the garden and ate fish out of the lake. And he was like a sharpshooter. So he used to ride bareback horses and, shoot pheasant and squirrel in motion from a horse, that kind of a guy, just a man of the earth. And, they don't make them like that anymore. We don't have an environment that supports that kind of man, not easily. We don't have a earth environment that supports that kind of man anymore. And when I say man, like there's you could say that kind of person, but in this case, he was a real, genuine man. Yeah, it's very rare to meet a person of principle, integrity, and I never saw him not do something he committed to doing. And he had a big ego, and he'd be, I grew up getting hit a lot. That was part of the game. We had hard rules in our house, and a big lesson, I'll maybe leave it at this, was there was a time when I built really great rapport with my dad. And it's not, we always got along. I always respected him, and people would say, well, someday you're going to think your dad's stupid. Nah, I never thought my dad was stupid. I didn't like him sometimes a little bit, but I never disliked him. There was we always got along. But I didn't really get along that well with my mom. And I was a teenager, and I can remember we were not getting along, and my mom and I would get into a thing, and she's very passive aggressive. And I remember going to my dad saying, "Mom, this," and he goes, "You can stop right there, son." And I was like 14. He goes, "You see that?" He points at the door. "That's the door. I'm married to your mother. I ain't married to you. If you don't like it, get the hell out of my house right now." And that was the last time he ever had to have that conversation. I mean, I got it, and he meant it, and he would have thrown me out and never looked back. It was like, that was the rule. It was like, do not ever cross that line, boy. And maybe that's where I get a little more of my polarizing filter as I've evolved, and realize that, you don't have to be liked to be respected, and I don't care if I'm respected either. I just don't measure my own self-worth based upon what someone else says. I don't give a flying F about social media. I think it's a diseased toilet. I don't give a flying F about political correctness. I think it's stupid. And I think our woke movement has weakened the human soul, and it has weakened humanity and their culture in our country. And I don't mind drawing that line and saying I don't give a flying F what you think. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a jackass or mean. I respect you more. I don't give a rat's ass what hole you want to put it into. It doesn't mean I don't love and respect you, because if you create value, I love and respect you. But if you hide behind a lie, it is weak. It is inhuman. And I'd even go so far as to say immoral.
That's powerful. Well, Mike, I thought we were going to have a conversation about business and the blocking and tackling of business. And it turns out we had a conversation about business, but it was so much deeper and so much richer and so much more meaningful. And so I'm really, really grateful to you for the generosity of your sharing, the generosity of your experience. I always like to wrap up just with some things that I learned along the way. And again, I'm so thankful for the time that we spent together. But I picked up, really at the early part of it, what defines a great mastermind, right? And you said a great mastermind is like a great marriage. You really got to work at it. And you had some points in there about, giving, not taking, looking for expansive relationships and collaborations, looking for people who have skin in the game. I also was super excited to hear about the way you actively take notes and implement simultaneously. Your sort of now and done philosophy. I thought that was super inspiring and definitely something I'm going to try to achieve. I'm going to practice that at the next coach session that I'm at. The value of direct mentors who communicate clearly when you're doing something stupid, and how it is unkind to commit to something and not do it. And it's unkind to express interest in something that you're not actually interested in. You gave deep, meaningful words to this outgrowing that happens as you move through life and the risks associated with that, and how that can really entrap people, and that there's loneliness, and there's a difficult time, and I think that your story gives other people who hear that and feel that courage to seek out others and have those conversations. And then at the end there, just the beautiful story about your father, and it really brought to light the source of the hard lines that you're drawing, and why that's meaningful to you, and how that's so deeply connected to who you are and how you were raised. So, Mike, I can't imagine an hour better spent. I know our listeners will feel the same way. So thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Wow, no, thanks. That was you're an excellent note taker, and it actually makes my my ramblings sound organized and structured. So thank you, and I really appreciate it. You guys did a really good job putting this together. I'm glad you asked me to be here, and I hope your listeners get something out of it. And thank God for good dads.
Yeah. Amen to that. I know they will get something out of it. And if they want to continue the conversation with you, if they want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to take the next step?
Sure. Well, one of the best ways, and it's my way of giving forward as well, is you can get this book. It's Your Next Act for free. You just go to my website, which is mikekoenigs.com/free, and there you'll download it. And when you download it, I'll see that I have a Slack channel that gets every time someone downloads it. It notifies me, and you can reach me or my team right through that conversation, and I see every message that comes through. I love the feedback, and hopefully you'll find something in that book for you to find your next level human expression of yourself and be able to give yourself in the way you were created and designed for. And my only hope is that you achieve that level of fulfillment that I think we're all capable of. I really do believe we are. Everyone is born unique and special, and it's your job to learn how to navigate your vehicle and then navigate your operator and create a symphony between the two.
Well said. Unleash your superpowers, and the best is yet to come. Thank you so much, Mike.